This is my review of Donor Unknown, which has a limit of 1,000 words. So, Donor Unknown is a film about a sperm donor in the USA and the journey of his donated children to find each other and to find him. The brief for my review is this a science film? I would say that it most certainly is. Just because it doesn't have an overarching narrator and a focus on scientific method doesn't mean that it's a science film. I think it's very good that it focuses on the impact on the human story. And it's presented in a series of interviews, but we don't hear the questions that get asked to people, so it feels more like that they're recounting the story directly to the audience, which is nice. The information that gets given on the subject of sperm donation is woven into the narrative, so the interviews with the staff at the clinic or the recollections of the sperm donor that the film focuses on and his experience dealing with the clinics. He recounts how much he got paid and what sort of procedures they had in the clinics themselves. I think it's very good that there is a lack of stigma or taboo of any kind in the interviews. The film is unflinching, if you like, when it covers things like drug use or mental illness, and also the emotional impact of being a donor child, growing up with that kind of information, or without it in some cases. One girl talks about how angry she is that her parents sort of lied by omission and never told her about her real father. So I'd say it's very refreshing in that aspect, and you also feel that as the audience anyway, you feel that the people being interviewed are very relaxed around the film crew. You get a sense that they're not putting on a persona or anything. That's who they are. So I think that's very good. There's also some other issues raised, such as the fact that the clinics promised people that they would only let each donor provide the sperm for a certain number of children, whereas one charity that runs the online listings that allow children to find each other according to the donor registration numbers say that one donor can be responsible for as many as 50 children in an example that they give. So obviously there are some psychological aspects to that as well, so there's even more science sort of interwoven in there, which is good. And also the ethics of that kind of system where donations are made but there's no real regulation of the industry, no limit on the number of times they can pay a donor to give a sample, whereas you can't get paid in the EU. But also there's the issue of anonymity, and the current UK laws, and of course now allow the children to find out who the donor is at the age of 18, whereas that's not the case in the USA, and they have to voluntarily come forward. Another piece of science that comes through without being shoved into your face by a narrator or anything sort of very crude is the issue of nature versus nurture. So how much of your personality and your attributes and so forth as a person you get from your genetics, and how much you get from the environment you're raised in. So obviously the donor siblings have shared characteristics, so similar foreheads or toes or whatever, and even mental attributes, sort of whether they're musical, this sort of thing seems to come through, but they also show things that one wouldn't really have thought of, so things like mannerisms, the way they brush their hair aside and so forth, they share, even though they were raised by different people in different parts of the country, and so it's surprising that such things come from their genetics, or at least in theory. It would be interesting to do a psychological study, I don't know if there are any, I'll have to have a look at that, into whether donor siblings take on the mannerisms from each other when they meet, or in order to sort of feel closer to those otherwise unknown relatives, or whether they had them from birth. Another ethical issue that the film covers well is the sort of semi-designer babies kind of vibe that you get from the sperm donor clinics, who in their online search for donors show where you can take hair and eye colour or nationality, interests, this sort of thing, which wouldn't be too bad if they didn't have a celebrity lookalikes section where you can look through and say, oh, I want a child that looks like Brad Pitt or whatever, which it feels very gimmicky, given that they're dealing in something so, or that should be so sort of important. But as well as the science, the film also covers some quite holistic viewpoints, spiritual and philosophical aspects of the people that they talk to. So the same-sex couples who have raised donor children are talking about their emphasis on sort of love and the family, and how that can be more important in their view than providing a father figure. Whilst the donor that they follow himself he talks about his hippie philosophy, and he refers to himself as a soul caller when he's doing his sperm donation. And also he has a lot of sort of conspiracy theory views, and I think it's nice that they include those sorts of things alongside the science, to say such an issue needs to be looked at as a whole, and not just from a very clinical, cold scientific viewpoint, or from too much of a sort of holistic, lovey-dovey, you might call them, viewpoints. So I'd say that on the whole the film presents a very relaxed, almost atmosphere. You get the feeling that the people it's talking to are very real, the events seem very real, though the chronology is a little off, because the film is shot sort of from part way through, and some parts of it are people recounting stories. But I don't think that's particularly jarring or a problem. It's nice to have that sort of leading the viewer through the story, which is important. It's very much a narrative piece. On the whole, it's very positive. There's a nice atmosphere that feels not really very artificial. There are some negative parts, like the girl whose parents won't appear, and who she's very angry with for not telling her that she was donor conceived. But on the whole, there's a positive aspect of the siblings and their newfound family, and the fact that they get on reasonably well with their donor father. Even though they might not think of him as a father, they still, it's nice that they seem to sort of connect with him, even if they don't see him as a proper family member. It comes across on the whole as a very well balanced film. It has social aspects, it has human aspects, it has scientific aspects, and it blends those together nicely. And on the whole, I think it's a very good science film for it. So I think that's everything. I should be trying to post more stuff up to this channel soon. Working with my friend Emily. We're going to be doing travel tips and film reviews and all sorts of bits and bobs that we put together in the near future. So, Dr. Wasp out, as it were. Oh dear, that sounds terrible. Never mind. Anyway, thanks for watching.